And this idea to take video games and meditation, the retreat that video games gave me as a young person to escape all this chaos around me, with the arrival of virtual reality, suddenly became this container that I could experiment with the mashup.
So I'm here with Nanea Reeves, CEO of Tripp VR, and we're going to take a walk through her entrepreneurial journey. First of all, thank you for being here today.
You're welcome.
Every time I see you, my heart gets happy.
Oh, well, you and I are kindred spirits, having, been high-functioning females in the game industry.
True.
Yeah.
And now doing things related to the game industry, but larger.
Right, and I think that progression of wanting to have impact around us and with our actions, I'm seeing more and more out in the zeitgeist, and I find it really inspiring. People like yourself, Nicole Bradford, who worked at World of Warcraft in China and is now running the transformative tech community. There's more and more people like us thinking about how to have real impact and make a contribution. I just love that.
Me too. And I'm excited to share what you're doing in that area. First, let's talk about how you got there. So, what first drew you into the world of tech and design?
Well, I started really as a gamer. I grew up in a pretty turbulent childhood. I know everyone has kind of their tale of woe. I had it maybe better than some and worse than others. My mother struggled with drug addiction and mental health problems my entire life, and most of her life as well. And so as a child in that environment, I was always looking for avenues to escape. And first it started off with books and board games, and eventually, when arcades started popping up, video game arcades, I found myself there more and more, and was always into computers and game consoles, and it was really kind of an avenue to escape. It's why I've been such a big advocate, though, for girls to play video games, because playing video games led me organically to an interest in tech. You want to get online and connect with other people. Sometimes you'll want to mod the game, and you start finding out how do you change things. And then now we have games like Roblox and Minecraft where the toolkits start to look a lot like software interfaces. And so I think getting early exposure to that mindset of seeing myself as a builder and a maker and a creator really came organically through playing video games.
What were some of the pivot points and moments in your career where you saw yourself as a maker and then where you leveled up and were an executive?
Well, I started off as a web designer, and then started coding those interfaces back in the day where there weren't these WYSIWYG editors. And there was something about coding I really enjoyed, because you kind of get in the zone in the same way you get while you're playing a video game as well. If they're well architected, they can trigger a flow state. And so when the web started to really kind of explode from a business standpoint in the mid to late 90s, I was coding websites, as a way to make money, and just ended up being in the right place at the right time. And I wasn't the best coder, and what I found was whenever I would pitch anything that I was working on to a client, I was working in a web development shop, they would ask, "Oh, we really like Nanea. Can she manage our account?" Working for companies like Mattel or Fox, and we were in Hollywood, so we had a lot of Hollywood clients.
And this is when you were in your 20s?
Yeah, early, maybe even late teens. So I'm definitely a self-taught person. I don't have computer science degree, or I thought I would go into a fine arts track, more of an artist focused creative, but found that for whatever reason, I had a good head for business as well, like how to translate strategy into product. And it just evolved organically over my career. People liked me and took me under their wing and kind of trained me as well. And I, for whatever reason, was more excited about learning from others and not thinking I knew everything. And I think that really, that mindset and attitude served me well.
That's interesting because one of the things that can happen when people get very well educated, especially at prestigious institutions, is that kind of "I know a lot" attitude, which
Right.
can actually get in your way of getting really, really good at things.
Well, I don't have that journey to, know that, but it's just, I've worked alongside a lot of very wonderfully educated people. And, that's the one thing I love about software development is you can all come together with an idea and bring multiple points of view, and something wonderful can happen.
How did you get the spark for Trip?
So, I had worked in the video game industry for a long time. Started off with coding websites and ended up at a tech incubator. And uh, one of the companies they incubated was a mobile game company. And so I've been working in that industry successfully for a long time. Concurrently, I had developed a meditation practice throughout the years that had been given to me when I was a 15-year-old, dealing with a lot of the damage that was caused by my early childhood and having a mother who's not well. And I think it saved my life. And it was something also that just strategically allowed me to be really present, and manage my emotional responses or reactions in the business environment. So I do think it was also a reason why I was different and uh, just mindful, mindfully present. It's almost been 5 years now. My husband was suddenly diagnosed with cancer, and he passed away about 4.5 years ago, almost 5 years ago. And I could see when I was kind of going through my grieving process and starting to emerge out of it, that my meditation practice and his actually helped us navigate this very challenging life experience that most people will go through. That just kept coming up as I was trying to contemplate, what do I do next with my life? Here I am, this grown person with this clearing and no accountability to anyone but myself, which is unusual for most people as we progress in our lives. Our sense of responsibility and obligation, increases. And here I had nothing but room and space to rebuild my life accordingly. And so really just went into a deep sort of internal retreat to ask myself, what do I want to do next? And what does the company look like that I want to run? I've been number 2 for a long time as COO and president, head of product, head of technology. But what does the company look like that I want to run? And this idea to take video games and meditation and those ideas of, the retreat that video games gave me as a young person to escape all this chaos around me, there was something in that with the arrival of virtual reality suddenly became this container that I could experiment with the mashup.
Trip gives you an experience that's effectively an altered state.
That was our initial idea, was could we use the immersive property of virtual reality to give you a space that you could connect more deeply with yourself. And ultimately support you with, for lack of a better term, being able to hack your mood, right? And if you look in the real world, some people look at psychedelics as an immersion to trigger transformative change. And virtual reality becomes this really interesting method of delivering something as immersive in some ways, but while you're fully conscious. And so I think a lot of people in VR have been focusing a lot on just simulating this world in virtual reality. But what I saw was kind of the big opportunity, or at least what was curious to me as a product kind of focused entrepreneur, was could we take you to a place that you can't experience in your everyday life? And what would that look like? And how could you do it under this wrapper of trying to support you and help you? In much the same way that a really deep transformative meditation practice can do, but it doesn't need to take so many years to evolve in the way that mine has. You know, how can we use it to hack it?
So what have you learned?
Yeah,
That was what you wanted to do. You're deep into it. You're
right,
elbow deep in it.
right.
What are you learning?
Well, so we were funded in September of 2017 by Tim Chang at Mayfield, and he's one of the most, forward-thinking entrepreneurs, and he's very committed to personal transformation as well. So we couldn't have found a better first initial investor in our company than Tim. And so just as an entrepreneur, when you have a crazy idea like Tripp, you need the right people in the room, even as an investor, to guide you. Really super important. And so that was one thing that I have learned in my career, that how you construct your board of directors is also very important. Because if you think about it in a way that this is the most important hire I'm going to make is an investor, because I can't fire them. They're in the journey with you for the long haul, right? So you have to be very mindful about how you construct your board. And if the agendas aren't aligned with yours, it can be incredibly challenging as a CEO to manage your board effectively. And so that's one thing I learned just from a very strategic standpoint, that because we're so mission-based and purpose-driven as a company, I had to, be very thoughtful about who comes into the company, as well from an investor standpoint, but also from team as well. I've also learned that it is harder than it looks to take an idea to execution. And I've known that, because I've done it over and over again. And that where I can be better I've learned a lot about myself as a leader. The difference between being a CEO and a COO, I had no real understanding about the difference, because I've always been like a core part of the company and driving the strategic direction, running operations and product. But to be a CEO, there's some parts of it can be very lonely, if that makes sense, because I have to be thoughtful about what I push down to my team and how I communicate externally in a way that I didn't have to think about as much before. And it's really important, because when the going gets tough, people need to be inspired. They need to be motivated on both sides, the consumer, the investor front, the team side. And that can be very isolating. From the product standpoint, what's been most exciting for me is to work with academia and the medical community to measure our impact on what we've actually built and what we're doing. So we have several clinical trials up and running to get data. How those trials are constructed, it's a whole new arena for me, and I've been fascinated by it, and I've learned so much, and especially in the last year, on what a good study looks like, what a good quality research team looks like, because it takes just as much effort to get something poorly constructed deployed as something well constructed. So the quality of the researcher is everything.
It takes just as much effort to get something poorly constructed deployed as something well constructed. That's a little bit of gold right there. Because again, strategically, it's like, well, if you know that, then you make different decisions.
Yeah, and I didn't know it the first one, right? But I learned right away. And so this is why, even on the research side, we had an MVP, and all of a sudden I knew like this was really important. Our focus is on delivering a consumer product and subscription service. You can go to tripp.com right now, buy a VR device from us if you don't have one, and subscribe to our service. We want to democratize self-care of your inner self, promote inner fitness, for lack of a better term. But the research is really important, at minimum, just so that we're launching products in a responsible manner. You're dealing with people, connecting to people emotionally. Like, you want to be responsible in that and make sure we're not doing any harm or anything, inadvertently damaging. The other thing is that, one, just from a purely self-interest, being able to make claims, even in our marketing, that we are clinically validated and actually can state different, results. Focused data points is important. So it's been fun to figure out, how do you create evidence-based research around this concept of hacking mindfulness, producing different states of being. That has been fascinating to work on. And I love, what I love about being a startup entrepreneur is I don't have to say, this is what I do, and then go and do that same thing at other companies over and over again. Like, that has not been my work life and how I've created it. It's more like, I want to find out if people will play a game on their cell phone, and that got me interested in mobile gaming. Or let's see if we can use VR to hack different states of consciousness. And so that's what we're investigating now. When you do that, you might build something that you think is doing that, but how do you measure it?
Totally. Well, that's a lot of the landscape now of tech meets medical is grappling with those questions and
Right.
really looking at, what does it mean to be FDA approved? What does it mean to be covered by insurance? All those, I'm sure you're dealing with those as well,
We
right?
are, because we were awarded as a co-recipient of a big grant from the National Institute of Drug Abuse, which, given my childhood and my, the impact of addiction on my family, I lost a sister who went down the same path as my mom did, and she overdosed from a heroin overdose. And so it's incredibly important and meaningful to me as just a human, to be able to have this initiative focused on addiction recovery. I think that in the area of using technology in the medical space, you have two mindsets that are very different. People like me who just get your minimum viable product out in, move fast, break things, you can clean it up later, course correct, iterate. That does not apply when you are dealing with someone's emotional well-being or a physical state. So, and we've seen tech mindsets go into that area and had very negative results, right? We have some very powerful examples of like Theranos and other companies, right? And so it's important that we be methodical and learn from the academic and medical community on how to go to market responsibly. But we can bring people like companies like Tripp and others, we can bring that mindset of, how do you turn this into a scalable solution, right? And
And a pleasurable
Well,
experience.
that's the big
Because a
thing.
lot of the medical, I do a lot of work in tech meets health. And when it comes out of science, it can be very validated, but
Hmm.
making that into a pleasurable experience that people actually are motivated enough to use, not so easy. And
Well,
that's where people like you come in.
yeah, and so I think that we're all learning how to work together right
Mhm.
now. And, it's a different shift for a medical entity or even academic research entity to understand that a digital therapeutic that delivers an intervention for a disease or an indication, it's a live service at its core. And the intervention gets delivered through engagement. And, in the games industry, we know how to drive engagement. We know how to retain users. People who are good at it know how to do that. And so this is a new ecosystem for a pharmaceutical, company. They've never had that kind of direct relationship with the customer that's ongoing.
That's true. I hadn't thought of that.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a lot of disintermediation.
Yes, and you need the mechanisms to understand churn and why someone will stop using this thing and how do you re-engage them, and so it starts looking a lot like a multiplayer
Game.
online service, right?
Yeah. Well, we're talking about engagement and addiction, and that's a continuum, right?
It is, sure. You can use, look, I'm excited about this whole movement of taking tech, algorithms, all these things we've been using to get you addicted to a game, to get you to feel so badly about yourself that you need to buy this thing. I mean, the tech around that is next level. We're being manipulated all over the place. Can we just take a shift and use that same tech to start helping people, and promote more positive outcomes? So the even just looking at VR, I mean, the first wave of VR content that came out was pretty much all designed to scare the crap out of you, right? We're not into the bad trips.
Creatively, how did you come up with the content of Trip since it's not modeled on the real world?
Well, we originally started with thinking about, let's put you, I mean, if you're thinking about meditation and VR in general, we had some more traditional thinking initially, like let's put you on a beach or put you in a forest,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
then we'll transition the environment into something a little more otherworldly, right? When we did our first prototype like that, we never felt good on the beach or in the forest. And once I started digging into the research, I couldn't understand why, but I started to realize, oh, there's sensory dissonance because my brain knows what a beach or a forest or Amy's backyard should feel like. I have a lot of reference, frame of reference for that. So that sensory dissonance was actually creating a negative response.
Uncanny Valley.
It's uncanny valley. It's its own weird spatial uncanny valley. And if you look at all the other meditative VR experiences, they all took that approach that we started with. So it was really this concept that we all know in software development is the way to build anything awesome. You just have to start prototyping and iterating.
Thank
And
you. Yeah.
that led us to this idea. But we started to experiment with really cool features, like our mobile app allows you to upload images from your own life into the trip experience, and that
That
just
gets me right here,
I've
right?
seen
Like, I
people
think
do
about
some.
your life and
Yeah.
what have you seen?
Well, I've seen, we have several users who are very late stage disease using our product. Might help. One said it distracts them from the cancer pain they're experiencing. Another one told us that he uploads images of himself when he was younger and healthy so that he can kind of hold space for who he is, that he's not his
This
disease.
ravaged
Yeah,
person.
yeah, and that he has found very beneficial. I saw another person who was kind of using it more like some weird next level immersive vision board where they upload inspiring things they want to achieve and then they focus their meditative kind of mindset on that, and it's kind of to set intention. And I did something on the anniversary of my husband's death, which has normally been a sad day for me. In the morning, I uploaded a bunch of pictures of him and just really just spent a good 10 minutes honoring our journey together. And in a way, it felt really empowering because I was opting into it as opposed to it just being this difficult day for me, and took it off and just stepped into my new life that I was creating on my own. And I don't even think we really understand like how that can evolve, but there was something very powerful in me opting into taking care of myself and holding space for this, you know, journey we had. It was less about grief and it was more about gratitude. And I thought that it was interesting that this little tool had facilitated that for me. So that's what I want to investigate more on and evolve. And I'd love to find more product people who are motivated and incentivized by creating those kind of experiences.
I think you're right, as you said at the beginning of our conversation, there's more and more of that. And I think part of it is people in sophisticated product people getting older and realizing there's a lot more to life than, chasing their exit.
Right.
Um, but also just the tech is evolving. And,
Yeah.
we all stand on the shoulders of giants. And I stand on the shoulders of what you and others did in mobile gaming. And I developed stuff in MMOs and multiplayer gaming other people are leveraging. And we're all learning together. What do you see going on in your field in VR meets mental health? That is, what are those disruptive forces? Where do you see that field heading right now?
Well, I think it's very exciting. We've seen some major funding events in that area in the industry. We've seen some research, evidence-based research, start to be released and published that seem incredibly promising. There's been a long road of using VR in mental health research and applications by people like Walter Greenleaf at Stanford and Skip Rizzo at USC, Jeremy Bailenson at Stanford. Lots of people have been pioneering that road. We've never had the device profile that could even do the research at scale until now. And so the fact that we can be up and running in clinical studies with control groups that even include a sham VR, do you know? So we can control against VR effect as well. The studies are getting more and more sophisticated. I think there's huge opportunity in the areas of pain management, stroke rehab. There's some very fascinating studies around phantom limb and being able to show that in VR. So that really, now that we have better imaging, we can analyze the effects. I think it's going to be over the next 5 years, you'll see multiple products in market that are therapeutic, that are FDA cleared at least, with what they call a 510K FDA clearance, which is different than the full approval path. We're already seeing that start to happen in the area of VR. Depression, pain management right now as a distraction, stroke rehab, improving cognitive function, PTSD, especially in the area of exposure therapy where you can simulate.
Right. Oh, yeah.
And then one of the most fascinating things I've seen is Skip Rizzo has created a virtual reality AI therapist. And he found that at least with combat veterans, they were more honest with the AI therapist because they didn't feel the judgment of a human being. So it doesn't replace the therapist, but maybe it creates a different therapeutic interaction that can have benefits where somebody can actually articulate something that they're afraid to tell a human.
One of the really interesting things you and I have in common is we've been through the games industry and the broader tech industry and worked in the mental tech meets mental health and really had the perspective of working with lots of teams of people,
Right.
getting things done. What was that like for you as a woman? And how did you navigate being somebody without a lot of degrees and background, but really smart with all this talent, wanting to build, wanting to make a contribution? What was your MO for navigating that?
I had an immediate awareness that people have biases, right? They have all different types of biases too. It's not just against women. And maybe they're even great people and they think they're very open minded and they're not even aware of the pushback that they have. But I could see that because of all the reasons that you just stated, not having a PhD or a computer science degree and being a young female, I needed to be able to articulate my ideas in a way that would make people have faith in my ability to deliver on them. So what I found very early on is that if I got into the analytics and the data, and I presented data in a way to support my hypothesis, that I could get buy-in on my ideas. And also this concept of prototyping and iterating seemed to lower the risk profile of funding one of my initiatives in a way where I could say, here's what I think the opportunity is based on the data, not just my, girly instinct. And, but here are the tests I want to propose on, we can see if it can actually get there. It'll only cost X amount to fund to get to this proof point. And if it doesn't work, we didn't lose that much, but we've learned a lot. And I found that way of proposing my idea was really hard to say no to if they really wanted to have an innovative, a culture of innovation. And so for me, it was less about getting angry about any kind of perceived pushback that was gender focused, and just figuring out how the heck am I going to navigate this? And so data really became a key because you can't really argue with the numbers. Now I do know you can cherry pick data and
Right.
I always thought it'd be a funny talk to take one data set and show all the different
Stories you
stories
could
you could
tell with
tell.
it,
Yeah, it'd be
right?
hilarious, right? What I have seen is, and I don't know if you experienced this, but I did see once I, started to advance in my career, I was held to different performance metrics. Like I wasn't allowed to fail as much without like harsher repercussions than my male counterparts. So again, data really helped me in that because I always knew I needed to measure what I was doing. And but if you think of the business landscape, like capture the flag, right? There's or like a game board. There's a finite pool of resources. It's called the budget, and the only way that I can get my stuff done is get more budget. And the only way I can get more budget is to say, Amy doesn't deserve her budget because, it's not strategic, it's not forward. I deserve more of that money, right? And it's a game, and you can get butthurt about that game and say it's really political, or you can figure out, okay, how am I going to take care of my team and get funded, And once I started thinking about it more like a game, and how do I play to win, but how do I play to win in a way that makes people feel good about winning and me winning, was made working and my work life more fun.
So, one of the things I think a lot of women struggle with, not all, but a lot, is how to develop great relationships with men and with powerful men.
Yeah,
I I have lots and lots and lots of great relationships in the gaming industry.
yeah,
I
me
did
too.
not have a lot of bad things happen.
No.
And sometimes people will say to me, like, how did you do that? Is it just you're some magical unicorn? Somehow I get sexism heaped on me wherever I go. So some of it is probably just right place, right time. But you also rose up and became someone who's making amazing contributions while your sister spiraled into addiction. People have qualities
Hmm.
and they react to situations in clearly different ways. What have you learned about the thing inside you that has let you rise up out of your background and also create great relationships with a lot of very imperfect people,
Well,
right? Because we're all imperfect, of course.
yeah, well, not self-awareness, to realize that I'm also not perfect, and I can be an asshole just by mistake, without being mindful. So I always go back to that therapist who taught me how to meditate when I was 15. It has really helped me in my work life to not be reactive, to really sit and be present and think, what does Amy want out of this? Can can we come together in an agreement that'll make us all feel good about the negotiation and also about the journey going forward from that? And so, it's just that's one of the tools that has definitely helped me. Looking at it like a game and playing to win the game has really helped my decision framework, because if you don't take a career path that will lead to the top, you will be paid less. You will not have a say in corporate strategy, right? And I have seen a lot of women not take roles that have P&L ownership, that own revenue, that own product, that own strategy. And by nature of that organizationally, you'll always be sort of in that second tier, important roles, but not the ones that are going to get all the cash and prizes. So with my journey, I have been very fortunate to have many great business leaders, men and women, be sponsors of me, not mentors, but sponsors, right? Because you need to get your initiatives funded. Mentoring's great and important, but in a corporate environment or any kind of workplace environment, you have to get buy-in and get someone to say, I'm going to fund your initiative, right? And your initiative should, for me, I found when I looked at things that would make the company more profitable or make them new avenues of revenue generation, that's really what drove my career advancement, not me being a male or a female, right? It was just a focus on contribution. And if you can do it in a way where you're not pissing people off along the way, which I haven't always been good at. I was, kind of used a lot of muscle in the early days to get heard. And I've learned that I can also I can get things done without making people feel bad as well.
Those are great tips. So where can people go to find out more about Trip VR?
Tripp.com.
Oh, great. We'll link
And
that in the
and we're
description.
also working on some AR stuff, and we're expanding our mobile touch point to the end user. And I cruise our support channel all the time. We have a little support chat bot that you can send in any requests. I will answer them, and I've found that that's been the best way to determine our product roadmap, is look at all the customer support conversations and even jump in on them. It's something I heard Brian Chesky did early on with Airbnb, and he and his co-founder went and met with all of the hosts individually and spent hours talking to them in the early days, and that really helped them solve a lot of early issues in their product and their service offering. And I have found that direct communication, at least for now, to be incredibly valuable.
Yeah, later in the scale, it can backfire, but early on, the same thing happened at eBay. I worked with them early
Oh,
on,
yeah.
and we had the same thing. We were getting there was this tight loop between the support forums and product
What
development.
did you
So
do at eBay?
I designed, co-designed some of their core systems. I helped fix the reputation system.
Oh,
It
wow.
wasn't tied to transactions,
Right.
and we got it tied to transactions. Hello.
Well, that was a
And
big
the power
game
and then
changer.
the tiered power seller system, I designed that, and it was somewhat game-like, and
Uh-huh.
just helped them tune a lot of their core systems, and it was amazing. It
Yeah.
was system design, heaven and hell at the same
Well, that
time.
makes sense that the whole reputation component, which is now, industry standard, that started in the games industry.
Yeah, well, it started there, but they were trying to figure out how to make it fair, and there's a longer story there.
Yeah,
Well,
I'm sure.
I'll tell you sometime over martinis, but
Yeah, I bet. I bet.
so thank you so much
You're
for joining
welcome.
us
Thank
today.
you.
It was just a pleasure,
Oh,
and
great.
I'm so excited about what you're doing, and I count myself among the people that support this group of us who are building things that make the world better by holding people's attention, not worse.
Yeah, we need it now. We've got big challenges ahead of us as a sea of humanity, and we need the mindset of people who are builders and makers and innovators, and but come at it from a place of heart and contribution. It's really important.
All right, thank you for
You're
leading the
welcome.
charge.
Well, not leading, but I'm definitely part of the journey. Thank you, Amy.
Want more? Join me in the Game Thinking Hub, our free group for product leaders who want to innovate smarter. Go to gamethinking.io/hub and sign up today. I'll see you there.